Hello, everybody. Welcome today to our live stream event, It's Our University. I'm Sam Purchase. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Archaeology here at the University of Sheffield. Today, we're here to support two of our departments, Archaeology and the School of Languages and Cultures. So archaeology currently is facing closure and the movement of two of its areas of study to other departments. This would effectively mean the end of archaeology at Sheffield. Obviously, we very much do not want that. But one of the other things that we're here to discuss today is a process that went behind this happening. The review left a lot of the students and staff involved feeling really ignored and like the consultation was tokenistic. And it left a lot of the people who weren't involved in the review process very much in the dark. Now, the same thing has happened, or something very similar, to our colleagues over at the School of Languages and Cultures. They're facing radical restructuring and material changes to core elements of their degree programs that will make courses less competitive and which could significantly devalue students' degrees. The plans for change didn't originate from members of SLC. They didn't have substantial input from modern language specialists and aren't supported by vast majority of staff. The changes threaten the reputation of the university as a place which values excellent careers and its students and areas of learning. Today, we have 2 hours of presentations for you. We have speakers and we have Q&As. We've got 3 sections into which we'll break this down. These are the value of the arts and humanities, university governance, and student and staff mental health. These will be followed by some messages of solidarity from our colleagues and our friends from around the world. Please know that if you have any questions at any point for any of our speakers, just type them into the comment section of the live stream, and Marion will be diligently typing them over to our speakers, and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as possible. We have a lot of different chairs for you today hosting each of the individual sessions. We have Nicholas Clarke, Matteo Bormetti, Angela Maccarinelli, and myself. So I'll hand it over to our first session. This is Nicholas Clarke. He's a PhD candidate in the Department of Archaeology, introducing our first session.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Sam, for those excellent opening remarks. So to start with today, one of the things that has been happening ever since the proposal to close the Archaeology department was announced is that at the Archaeology department, we have been receiving overwhelming support. So many emails have been pouring in to the Vice-Chancellor, to the University Executive Board, copying in the Archaeology department to let us know that that support is there and that people from all over the world are writing in. So to start with today, I thought I would share some of those emails with you. So if we just go over to the PowerPoint now. So this is a breakdown of the emails we received. We have so far received over 2,000 emails. This is a breakdown of most of them. We're still working our way through them. But at the top there, you'll notice it says support for option A. This was the option to retain the department as it currently stands and continue to invest in it. The other options being option B, to close the department completely, or option C, to close the department and move certain subjects into other departments within the university. Option C is the option that is being proposed by the university at this point. As you'll see at the top there, it says support for option A because we received no emails supporting options B or C. Every single email wanted us to retain the Department of Archaeology, to keep it open and to invest in it to ensure the future of archaeology at Sheffield. So I don't want to spend too long on statistics because frankly it's too early in the morning for numbers. But what I did want to share with you today, just for the next 10 minutes or so, is some of those messages of support that we have received in the emails. So I'm just going to read those out to you now. So this first one comes from a prominent archaeologist in the UK, representing some of the emails we've had from the commercial, the professional sector of archaeology. As an honorary graduate of Bradford University, a founding member of the Chartered Institute of Archaeologists, a fellow of the Society of Antiquarians, and a member of Channel 4's Time Team for over 20 years, I urge you to reconsider this option from both an academic and a public archaeology stance. From the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists itself, the largest national organisation within the UK, supporting and championing archaeology within the UK. The department stands as an exemplar in terms of engagement with and impact in local communities, as well as a contributor to research with national and international significance. There are factors which deliver considerable impact, capitalising on the huge public interest in archaeology. We urge you to find a solution to the problem which does not throw away the proud history and future potential of archaeology at Sheffield. From local organisations such as the Friends of Sheffield Castle, as you are probably aware, the University of Sheffield's Department of Archaeology was heavily involved with the Friends of Sheffield Castle with the project to investigate and bring to light some of the discoveries at Sheffield Castle. And so the Friends have this to say. This would be an appalling decision, given the incredible work this department has contributed to the benefit of the Sheffield community over many, many years, just at a time when history, heritage and archaeology are gathering momentum in the city and across the UK, and demand for archaeologists is very high. It seems incredible that such a short-sighted view is being proposed. One of the other great things about the Department of Archaeology at the University of Sheffield is that it sits at the heart of so many collaborative networks within the university itself. So from the Materials Science and Engineering Department, as someone who works at disciplinary interfaces, I really appreciate the breadth of subjects that archaeology covers, from history and classics through to engineering, biology and physics. Research is increasingly moving cross-disciplinary, and we need departments that understand this ethos and can teach it to students. Across educational sectors, there is increasing talk of the need for STEM, science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, and I think this is one of the few departments that can truly embrace this concept. From current and prospective archaeology students, we had emails of support. I have friends who have studied 7 other subjects, and their experience has been one of poor support, poor guidance, and lazy teaching. I am, and have always been proud to say that archaeology is nothing like that. It is a community of people with passion for their subjects and for their students. To close this department would be both a tragedy and a travesty. Again, from prospective students this time, I moved my family over 100 miles to study for a master's in paleoanthropology at Sheffield, based solely on the excellent reputation of the department. What the University Executive Board decision says to me is that you do not value the course and that there will be no resources for teaching and fieldwork. From students as well at other UK universities, moving certain subcategories of the department into other departments takes away the cross-fertilisation of ideas and practices, which is so necessary for the ecosystem of academia. You can't separate bones from the graves they are found in. You need an osteoarchaeologist alongside an expert in stone kists, and then someone with an eye on the documentary evidence across the way in history. And then you have a rounded conclusion. From international universities as well, students wrote in. The strength of archaeology as a discipline comes from its bringing together of geographically and temporally wide-ranging topics in order to think critically about the human past and the role of that past in our present. The dispersal of archaeologists into other units prevents any such dialogue from taking shape in the lab, the classroom or the field. At a time when the human past is increasingly taken up for the purposes of political projects, it is unethical to actively dismember the scientific inquiry that has, for decades, sought to balance and reorient such uncritical discourse. Again, academics from other universities as well, such as this senior academic from the University of York wrote in. Like many of my colleagues in a different UK archaeology department, I have worked alongside archaeologists at Sheffield in various capacities, and I'm shocked that such a thriving and successful academic community could be placed so suddenly under threat, seemingly without any real consultation or transparent rationale. Sheffield has been at the heart of UK archaeology for decades, and there is barely an institution or archaeological employer across the country that does not have Sheffield-trained archaeologists among its staff. The threat of closure has been met with disbelief, nationally and internationally. Speaking of that international support, it's not just students from other countries, academics too, heads of departments, heads of international research groups have written in. Current and emeritus faculty members at Sheffield have excellent records as teachers and researchers, and your alumni work in universities, research institutes, museums, governments, and private companies around the world. While university ranking systems only provide partial assessment of quality, the Department of Archaeology at Sheffield clearly stands out as one of the top departments in the world on objective measures of research productivity and impact. Of course, we've also had political support as well, cross-party political support in many cases. So, for example, this from Louise Hay, the MP for Sheffield Heeley. I was very disappointed to hear that the university was investigating withdrawing the funding from this historic and influential department within the university. This department's loss from the fabric of academia in Sheffield would be a huge mistake. I am following this debate closely and working with my fellow Sheffield MP, Paul Blomfield, and the university on this issue, and I hope to see it resolved. Local residents too. I think one of the things that the University Executive Board has failed to realise is that the Department of Archaeology is not just a department at a university, it's an essential part of local communities. In the entire 35 years I have lived here, the only occasions the gown of the university has reached out to the towns, or let's say villages of the Hope Valley, is by the activities of the university's archaeology department. Otherwise, the ivory towers of the Sheffield universities over Stanage Edge might just as well not exist. Archaeology graduates have better employment prospects than others, feeding the growing commercial archaeology business and the wider heritage and leisure industries. Perhaps you should consider archaeology by the same criteria as science and technology, as a nationally useful subject and of economic importance. So the core message then is that this is a world-class, highly respected Department of Archaeology that continues to punch well above its weight academically. It is a key player in ongoing interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary academic research projects. The department produces graduate archaeologists of the highest calibre and is therefore considered critically important by the commercial archaeology and heritage sectors in the UK. Its reference collections and the analytical services that it provides to commercial archaeological units and other academic departments are also of critical importance. The department is of vital importance to the region for collaborative research and public engagement projects, as well as other outreach activities. The closure or dismantling of the department would be catastrophic and should not happen. The most recent industry-wide survey of commercial archaeology in the UK established that archaeological employment grew by 7.8% in the year to March 2019, with an estimated 5,300 people working in commercial archaeology and 7,200 overall in all sectors of archaeology. The total value of the archaeology and heritage sector to the UK economy was steadily increasing and was worth over £250 million. Commercial archaeology was worth £258 million. Despite the growth in archaeological employment, it is recognised that there is an ongoing critical shortage of qualified archaeologists in Britain. Currently, the UK lacks the archaeological capacity required for more than 48 major infrastructure projects that are planned across the UK over the next 17 years, including HS2, Crossrail and major road upgrades. Archaeology remains the only shortage occupation listed under the category of social and humanities on the UK government's skilled worker visa shortage occupations webpage. Fieldwork is still the most in-demand skill, with 19% reporting a loss in this area, 52% buying in, and 55% training staff in this skill. 29% of employers believe there is a sector-wide shortage in this area. So there's more to go through, but rather than continue to subject you all to me talking, I'm actually going to hand over now to our first speaker. So if you give me a second, excuse me. Our first speaker, who needs very little introduction, a journalist and politician, she rose to prominence as leader of the Green Party between 2012 and 2016, before being made Duchess of Manor Castle in 2019 and became the second ever Green Peer of the Realm. A feminist with a strong interest in environmental issues and global justice, our speaker has long been an advocate for the arts and humanities and has already spoken out against the proposed closure of the archaeology department in the House of Lords. It is therefore my enormous pleasure to introduce, as our very first speaker, Natalie Bennett. Thank you for joining us today, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Nick. And you have given me a bit of a promotion. I'm only a baroness, not a duchess, but something for the medievalists to get into, perhaps, which tells you something about the British Constitution. But anyway, it's lovely to be with everyone this morning, although very sorry that I have to be here. When I heard the news, I was just absolutely shocked and horrified. And I actually had the opportunity to ask a question in the House a couple of days later. And I asked the government, did they not think that it was crucial to understand our present, to understand the past? And I got the usual kind of anodyne answer you'd expect. But I think I wanted to say something specifically about Sheffield and then really move on to the broader political context that this is all happening in, because other people can talk much more about what's happening within Sheffield University. But I think we shouldn't actually forget, and I was just looking around before today at the university's own website, which says it is very proud of our role as a civic university. And the origins of Sheffield University are in steel workers, coal miners, people putting in their pennies, a whole community coming together to say, we want to have a university, we're going to put our money in to have that university. And that's the foundation of Sheffield. And, I have been critical of both Sheffield universities in the past, that I think they need to be much more part of the town. But the University of Sheffield in particular, owes its origins to the town. And some of those letters and messages you're reading out there showed how much the town really cares about it. But I think we have to put this in the context of what's happening nationally. And I think it's important that we see this, because this is not just a Sheffield problem. We actually see archaeology, as well as many other arts, creative subjects, music, dance, and even media studies. And I should declare an interest here because I have a master's in mass communication from the University of Leicester. They're all basically facing a 50% funding cut from the central government, from Westminster, at the end of this year. And I think if we put this in context, a couple of years ago, there was this great proclaiming government press release: the arts and the creative sector is growing at twice the pace of the rest of the economy. Here's our GDP growth. Now, I, as a Green, might have some comments to make about GDP growth, but nonetheless, put this in as government's own terms. These subjects are absolutely crucial to our economy. They're very much part of a crucial part of getting the money in for Britain. And the obvious example of this, I haven't heard this cited as much as I expected, but where did all the ideas for Game of Thrones come from? It's not very hard to actually look and see, well, perhaps a mixture of study of the classics and archaeology, but there's a lot of both in there. And I bet lots of the set designers were looking at a lot of archaeological stuff to inform their work. But I of course, both archaeology and those other creative subjects, would like to look at them in a different context, which is what gives us a decent life, what gives us a quality of life. And we know that the arts, reading history, watching history documentaries, archaeology documentaries on television, these are something that really enrich people's lives at all stages of their lives. I can remember being that particular sort of about 7 or 8 year old who was utterly obsessed with ancient Egypt. And that's something that really helps open people's eyes to the world right through their life. So this is really crucial. And I think the other thing we have to look at is what's being done to universities, how universities have been pushed. Is they've been pushed to become commercial competing businesses. And this is another huge underlying problem that underlies where we are now, which is both a model that is clearly very, very dangerous. It's very financially risky, involves spending lots of money on buildings built on the back of huge amounts of student debt, which can't actually be repaid. Most students will never repay their student debt. The whole model is teetering and makes no sense. Education is a public good which should be paid for from general progressive taxation, not by putting a huge weight on student shoulders that will pursue them for 30 years. We need to really, I think, use some of these crisis points to talk about returning universities to being communities of scholars, places where everyone involved in the university is working together to further human knowledge, to tackle the so many crucial problems that we face now. And that's so clear when you look at so much of the work that's done, the research work that's done in the University of Sheffield Archaeology Department. A lot of it has huge relationship to environmental history, to understanding our soils, the history of our soils, the history of our agriculture, what we've done to the planet in the past, and that informs what we have to do now, as I'm working in the House on the Environment Bill. So I think we really have to look at this whole situation and see that what's happening in Sheffield has to be fought in Sheffield. And I can promise you that I will continue to do whatever I can in the House. I'm very happy to put down questions, to put down written questions, to push this through, to campaign, to talk about this as I've been doing. But I think it really is important we put this in the context where all of education, creative education, archaeology, I put in part in that, is under threat. And I think we have to also see, I've written about what I see as a far-right authoritarian government, what we have now. These are all subjects that help people think about how things can be different to how the world is now, how you can imaginatively, creatively build something different, look at the past to build the future. And we have a government that really does not want people thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, thinking about change. And that's the broader underlying context to all of this. So that sounds really negative. So I'm going to finish on a positive, because I always believe that we all need hope. Hope is definitely the emotion that should be, from broadly speaking, our side of politics. And where the world is now is profoundly unstable, economically, socially, environmentally, politically, educationally. And that's really good news, because we've been trashing the planet, creating a thoroughly miserable society, loading down future generations with debt. Things are going to change, and that's an opportunity to build things really differently. So what I really encourage people to think about as they're listening today and think about in the future is both fighting to save the good things we've got now, like the University of Sheffield Archaeology Department, but also thinking about how we need to build something really different to get back to that community of scholars, to bring many more people from all parts of Sheffield, from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds in Sheffield, to get them involved in the university, get them involved in lifelong learning, to get them involved in research and thinking about our Sheffield, what's there underneath the ground, underneath that castle that's now just surrounded by hoardings. This is all part of all of our lives, and let's get everyone involved in archaeology and many other subjects in the University of Sheffield. Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you so much for speaking today, Baroness Natalie Bennett, not a Duchess yet, we'll see how it goes. But on that point, speaking to that wider impact, those local and international communities and networks, I'd like to hand over now to our second chair, Matteo Bormetti, also a PhD student in the Department of Archaeology, for the next of today's session. Thank you very much.
Hello. So for this next session, we have quite a few speakers. So without further ado, I will hand the floor to archaeologist and campaign officer for UCU, University of Liverpool, Peta Rosenberg.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for inviting me today. What a brilliant rally it's been so far, actually. It's great. I bring a massive message of love and solidarity from the UCU at the University of Liverpool, and especially those of us in archaeology, classics and Egyptology, and the broader School of Histories, Languages and Cultures. Our solidarity, our support for your dispute and your archaeology department is massive. So I'm really proud to represent our side and bring solidarity to you. We are absolutely outraged by the proposal to close down Sheffield Archaeology. After years and years of underfunding and understaffing, it's a disgrace the way they're treating students and a terrible way to treat staff at your place. We also know that Sheffield Archaeology does brilliant work with the local community. I've seen lots of different projects that people are working on, and I think the university's decision shows that it just doesn't care about this. Clearly, universities are only there for academics. Local people and their heritage are not important. It's a terrible way to treat your staff, your students, and the community that the university is situated in. Certainly from a subject point of view, and particularly because I'm an Aegean archaeologist myself, the loss of archaeology at Sheffield is absolutely terrible. We know there's been cuts at other northern archaeology departments in recent years as well, and if Sheffield goes, Aegean archaeology will end up concentrated at Oxford and Cambridge. Is this what we really want? Only people with posh accents can research this stuff. Back to the bad old days of Arthur Evans and making archaeology a nice elitist pastime for rich men. There's no democracy in that, no interest in decolonising our subject. And the story of the past is going to be told by people who don't understand the hardships of the present. We absolutely can't let this happen. We're really disgusted about these proposals. Here at Liverpool, the archaeology department is not currently at threat, but truthfully, the government's proposal to cut 50% of arts funding for arts and humanities subjects, it means that we can't be complacent, we can't relax, because we know they'll want to come for us next. Cuts have already begun in some places, so Chester, London South Bank, all the history courses have been cancelled and all their work on decolonising has been thrown away. It's a disgrace. So many universities now are rubbing their hands together thinking, what cuts can we make? Who do we not need? Who's not bringing enough research funding? And so many staff are worried about their jobs. So we really have to stand together to resist the cuts at Sheffield and elsewhere, including those currently happening and those that are likely to come in the next year or so. At Liverpool, what we're fighting over is to save jobs in the health and life sciences. So scientists who work on COVID, scientists who work on local health issues. The university ranked all the staff in the faculty and used various very dubious research metrics in order to do this. They specifically focused on research income, which of course some research requires lots and lots of cash, some of it doesn't, but they targeted that and then picked the 47 worst performing members of staff in order to get rid of them. Now our UCU branch voted by 84% to take strike action to defend those people. Mostly they're people who weren't in the health and life sciences faculty. Lots of archaeologists who voted to go on strike and have been solid in that. It's because we know that if we let the university make these cuts, more cuts are going to follow. The appetite for cuts doesn't go away when you give them what they want. They just come back for more. So we took three weeks of strike action in May and June, and that's been followed by a really very successful marking and assessment boycott. It's thrown our university into disarray and exposed its really callous treatment of both staff and students at the university. Now, although the university took 100% of pay deductions for partial performance for those people who were on marking boycott, our action has still forced them to reduce the number of redundancies. So it started at 47. We're now on 21 jobs that are at risk. And if we hadn't fought back at all 47 people would be on the dole by now. And we know this is a really bad time to be looking for academic jobs. So taking 3 weeks strike action and a couple of weeks of marking boycott, all right, it's been tough. It required determination and people standing together in quite difficult circumstances. It also required the solidarity from other UCU branches, and that's what's really sustained our strike action and our boycott action. The support for Liverpool has been absolutely outstanding, and it means we know we can sustain the boycott for as long as we need it. That solidarity has given the confidence to our members and helped us to sustain our dispute. But we want to save all the jobs that are at risk. So we voted again in our branch to take more strike action, to show our bosses we're not going to give in on this, and send a message to all university bosses. Our union is strong, our members are determined, and when we stand together, we really can win. We found today the universities come crawling to us with the message of trying to make a few compromises, see if we can make it all better. We're winning this dispute, and it's because of that solidarity between different branches of UCU, because of the solidarity our students have shown, which has been brilliant, and because of the solidarity of other trade unionists and other organisations that we're able to be in such a strong position. So what I would say to you, when I said I bring a message of solidarity from UCU and the archaeologists at University of Liverpool, what I really meant was, look, you know you have to fight this. If you do fight against the cuts that are proposed at Sheffield, you will be supported. Your students, as we've seen from all those amazing messages before, your students are going to stand behind you. And members of our union across the country will stand behind Sheffield, because we know that if we let our bosses make any cuts like the ones at Sheffield, we know they're going to come back for more. But when we fight back, when we stand together, we can win. That's what solidarity means from Liverpool. And I really absolutely support your efforts here at Sheffield. I've seen the protests online. I've seen the activities you've done. I'm supporting you on Facebook and Twitter. There is a fight to be had, but you will absolutely have the solidarity of your union if you take on that fight. We can't let Sheffield Archaeology go. It's too important. It's too special. I've worked with Sheffield archaeologists at Knossos. I learned so much about the subject, about how to understand archaeology that I couldn't learn by just keeping it at Liverpool. This is something that we can't allow to go down. And when I talk about solidarity, it's real. We'll be right behind you all the way. So good luck with your battle, and what a brilliant rally we're having today. I look forward to the other speakers. Thanks very much for letting me speak today. Solidarity.
And thank you very much, Peter, for your message. We're really grateful for it. And our next speaker is a professor here at Sheffield University, Archaeology, and course director of MSc of Archaeology. He's a Green Party member and unreserved advocate for human rights and environmental conservation, representing Umberto Albarella.
Thank you. Sorry, just a minute, problem with the microphone, but thank you, Matteo, for introducing me. Gosh, guys, this starts feeling like a long campaign, but definitely worth running it, worth fighting for what we believe is right. I won't mince my words, and you won't be surprised to hear that. And the first thing I would like to say is that it's important to consider that what has been happening to the School of Languages and Cultures and to the Department of Archaeology is far from being an isolated case. We have to be clear that the work environment in British academia has become toxic. And we really have to wonder how it came to this and what is our responsibility, what we can do to reverse this situation. I will want to tackle this issue by briefly mentioning three areas. One is research, the other is our relationship with the students, and the other is governance of the university. I could, of course, talk for hours about each of them, but I will be very brief and just touch on some of what I regard as some of the key points. As far as research is concerned, I think Natalie made mention to this, and very correctly, which just shows that this is becoming well known also outside academic circles. There has been a massive emphasis on people competing with each other. And this has contributed to create this kind of toxic environment I was talking about. This is a massive mistake. Research, by definition, is a collaborative effort. And this is where successful research should, this is how successful research should thrive. But we have been, we have been forced to think in such a way that basically universities compete with each other. People now use the word and the expression competitors to just define other universities. But when you start seeing other universities slide out, then you start seeing a department within your university in that same way. So department will compete with each other. And the research groups within the same department will start competing with each other. And individuals within research groups will see other individuals rather than as their friends or their supporters and their collaborators, but rather as their competitors. And this is what leads to that kind of toxic environment I was talking about. I mean, the consequences of this attitude are devastating. I mean, one of the aspects that is really creating this problem is actually the funding system for research grants. This is really absolutely scandalous that as academics, we are accepting this as the only way to pursue research. I mean, one thing that I found extremely vulgar and unpleasant was when I remember our deputy vice chancellor got to the position that she has. The university advertised this and made a fuss about this, rightly so. And the first thing that was mentioned, not what a great manager, intellectual, and what a great influence on academic life this person was, but how much money they had brought to the university. I mean, there must be something seriously wrong about the way we think. I mean, the funding system is devastating for many people. You have to bear in mind that we tend to compete, and I hate to use this word, but this is what really happens, for grants that normally have between 5 and 10% chance of success. There are people who work in university who spend their whole careers apply for grants they'll never get. And can you imagine the waste of time, money, resources that is put in writing grant application one after another that are unsuccessful, and the mental health issue that is a consequence of this, rejection after rejection, are very hard to take. And don't give me, I mean, nobody is going to give me the bullshit that lack of success in grants is because your research applications weren't good enough. It is a massive lottery, and sometimes it's not a clean one. It's just a system that needs to be changed. Our colleague Stephen Grimm from the Imperial College of London committed suicide in 2014 as a consequence of the massive pressure that was put on him regarding grant capture. I'm really sad that he's not remembered more than we should. It is just an indication of the way things are going. And we see it all around us, what could be a great job, fantastic job for people working happily and constructively with each other about something they love, has become an absolutely poisoned chalice. And this is something that needs to change. The other thing I wanted to mention is our relationship with the students. I regard myself extremely lucky. I have a great relationship with my students. I love them, and I know that they respect me. And we have lots of fun together, great time together, and it's good to have that kind of relationship. However, this is not in line with the way university operates. It's no surprise to you that I'm going to say that obviously students in university language have become totally commodified. One of the reasons why university put teaching more at the center of its priorities a few years ago was because of the fee increase, okay? Because students now could be seen as money. The financial future of the university was basically based on how many students you could attract. And this is where teaching became much more central. I found this absolutely disgusting. Coming to the recent events, now it has the crass comment by our Deputy Vice Chancellor regarding the metaphor of comparing students to supermarket products has now become notorious. But the reason why that is an important remark is because this was not a slip of the tongue. I mean, this is really revealing of a very deep-rooted mentality that now has become predominant in the university. And it's something that I'm never going to accept, and we should not accept. And it is a shame that this kind of mentality is becoming more and more endemic to the university world. One of the things we should do, and this is one of the things really should be one of the top priority for us as a civic society, we really need to get rid of this funding system, or this fee system. I mean, even if I were the last one person in this country, I will carry on fighting for free education. Why should we fight for free education? Well, first, because free education provides equal opportunities, which is exactly what some political establishment does not want. And the other thing is that free education makes for a better society, because a society which is better informed, where everybody has got an opportunity to be educated about the world around us, allows us to make much fewer mistakes in the way we manage our society, and also to have, a better informed attitude towards our political and societal choices. So for the benefit of our society, this is what we should do. This is not, I'm afraid, what our managers are subscribing to, and rather they carry on treating the students in the way I mentioned, which I absolutely appalled about. And I will always be on the side of students fighting against this. Finally, I just want to mention governance. Universities now, for a while, they have embraced completely the neoliberal ideology and the top-down approach in the way things should be managed. There is a widespread belief that to be a good leader, you have to be a bully. And make no mistake, most our managers are bullies. And the reason why they're bullies is partly connected to this incredible combination of ignorance and arrogance. It's the combination that matters. If you think about that, we are all extremely ignorant people. Knowledge is huge and nobody can handle it. If you approach your ignorance with humility, you are okay, because you will be aware of the fact you only can know a very little amount of what is the world around us, whether it's a society, it's the natural world, it's the thinking, it's the books, the writing, or whatever. We only know a very limited part, and we should be humble about this. But these people are not humble, they are arrogant. And their ignorance combined with their arrogance creates lots of damage. We have seen it very clearly in the process that has led to the proposal of closing the Department of Archaeology, and also in the proposal that has led to this kind of absolutely shambolic suggestion of dividing languages, teaching from cultures in the School of Languages and Culture. These people do not listen. They are not interested in listening. They are just completely driven by their arrogance. And this is something that really cannot be accepted. It does go back to that kind of relationship, that toxic environment I was telling you about, because the current environment is promoting the people who are prepared to trample on others, the most cynical, the most competitive, at the expenses of other people. These people get there and they make those kind of decisions. That is the kind of situation that we need to get rid of. They still believe in this absolutely stupid idea of the strong leader. I'm so proud of the city of Sheffield that has recently in a referendum got rid of this concept of the strong leader that was embraced by the Sheffield City Council and led to absolutely disastrous decisions. And I'm also proud of the party I support that actually campaigned against this to create a much more democratic system led by committees. But while today we talk about participatory democracy and community assemblies, and there are different ways in which we try to make our democracy work, I'm afraid most university governance is still in the neoliberal Thatcherite 20th century. So I think we should confine them to the past. And I really think that there is only one direction for the management of universities like Leicester, Liverpool, and Sheffield to go, which is to resign and leave it room for people who are much more forward-looking, and they are much more prepared for much more compassionate attitude towards their staff and their students. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Umberto. I wish to remind our live stream audience, if they have any question for Umberto or for any other speaker, please type them down in the comments. We will try to report them to the speakers. And for our next speaker, we have Professor of Information and Organization in the School of Business in Leicester, advocate of academic staff mental health, Professor Simon Lilley.
Thanks, Matteo, and thanks to all for this kind invitation. I couldn't agree more with what's been said by the three preceding speakers. Angela asked me to wax lyrical a little on issues of governance, because they've been a particular fascination of mine, and also because if you're looking for case studies in how to do things badly, I'm well blessed with a local ethnographic in which I can explore these matters. And solidarity, of course, to all colleagues at Sheffield and Liverpool, and indeed across the country. This is, I think we're clearly a vanguard of what's being rolled out much more widely across the country. And I think one of the things to note about the three different cases is the ways in which what you might previously have thought would lend you some protection in situations such as this just doesn't seem to be working. So at Liverpool, we're looking at a department being attacked that is clearly engaged in work that you would think could not be more topical, could not be more related to a profound, wicked problem that society is grappling with at the moment. It seems to make no difference. At Sheffield, we're looking at a centre of excellence. That was the sort of thing that used to make sure that you were relatively safe. And at Leicester, included within the barking range of areas being targeted, we have the business school, which you would have thought as a business-facing entity in the university would again be one of those that would be relatively safe, even when the madness gets to peak level. So something else is going on, isn't it? And I think the previous speakers have already got at the essence of what a lot of that is. And it is primarily that rather than reacting as a sector to try and address the attacks upon the sector to the detriment of the society that the sector is supposedly there to support and enhance, we fight amongst each other. And our representatives seem incapable of grasping that a sector-wide response is what's required. And as a result, it seems to fall on us as union members to try and provide that for them. I think one of the key issues here is that in relation to university governance, we didn't spot it. We were a bit like the proverbial frog being boiled, and the water just kept getting hotter, and by the time it was hot enough to hurt, we couldn't get out of the water any longer. Colleagues were telling me 20 years ago to watch what was going on with the constitution of the university councils and their roles and responsibilities. There's been ever greater proportions of lay membership on those councils, but unfortunately, the lay members that seem to be attracted to university councils seem to be the sorts of people that have a fundamental disdain for the purpose of a university. Senates have unwittingly or unwisely, or perhaps even unknowingly in some cases, voted away their rights of scrutiny in order to free up nimbleness on the part of self-styled executive boards, acting out ever more ridiculous caricatures of what they think went on in businesses some time ago. And the result, of course, is an utter lack of scrutiny. And I'm just going to talk through in a little bit of detail some of the circumstances at Leicester and pick up on the issues Natalie was raising with regard to financing to try and show how problematic that is. So when we first became aware of the vandalism being planned, we started to take a little bit of a look at the accounts to see what they would tell us. Somewhere buried within those accounts were little bits of threads and details that those of us with time on their hands and the right expertise could actually follow to find some sense of what might be taking place. But if I give you a brief potted history, in 2016 and 17, the university had long-term debts of about 76 million. Seems about reasonable for an operation of its size, the sorts of amount of money you probably need to be borrowing in order to kind of keep refreshing your estate on a semi-reasonable basis. But they were already in potential problems over the covenants with their lenders. Now, you and I, when confronting a little bit of a difficulty in our lending, might try and look at our expenditure, might try and look at how to reassure the people lending us money that we were in a position to pay it back. But instead, our glorious leaders decided to go and borrow another £55 million. But this time, they went and borrowed it via private placement through from two US insurers, which means that the deal was subject to no scrutiny. It didn't have to have a prospectus. The details of it are utterly opaque to us. Worse still, they used some of that money to provide a little ring of assurance around another wheezy investment scheme, an off-balance sheet activity that's currently constructing the new halls of residence and some lecture theatres at the Freeman's Common site. The university seems, and again, this is very difficult to tell, we've had to find this out by chasing loyally reports, by looking at the land registry, and indeed we found ourselves at one point sniffing around a Bermuda-based insurance company which seems to have brokered and enacted the deal. And what seems to have happened is the university has got a 10% stake in this operation. £124 million of funding for it has come in the form of long-term bonds, index-linked bonds, that again have been sold to private equity and again have been sold as private placement. So we have no idea of their terms. What we do know is the university has already put up the land on which the project is taking place as assurance. We find that from the land registry. We also know that it's increasingly having to put larger and larger sums into an escrow account to guarantee the returns of the investors there. We also know that the underlying investment, the actual construction of the site itself, was rated as having a risk level of BBB, which is one level above a junk bond. But lo and behold, what's being sold to the holders of the bonds is rated AA. Someone somewhere is absorbing that risk. I can't tell you for sure who's absorbing that risk because I can't see the details under which the deals have been done. But on my calculations, the only income streams that are associated with servicing those debts come from potentially the university's catering, maybe some car parking, but primarily from future students' rents. And I don't doubt that the reason it's been de-risked is that we have guaranteed some form of minimum occupancy. So in the current joyous situation, we seem to have managed to enact a deal in which we have a number of unshakable long-term liabilities, but the income streams that might have serviced those are in real jeopardy as a consequence of the pandemic and governmental responses to that in terms of public health. So it's a difficult situation at the moment as to whether one's sitting there thinking, oh good, at least students can move into the halls of residence so the university won't go bust, or oh dear, students can move into the halls of residence and the pandemic will run for another few years. It's a situation that's utterly appalling. And there is a very, very little way of breaking it. Umberto's suggestion is the only reasonable one. We have to find a way of getting out of the governance of universities, those who arrive with visions from afar and are keen to enact them, regardless of what they find on the ground. My own sense of how one manages effectively on the basis of 30 years experience teaching managers to do so and learning from them is that what you do is you arrive at an organisation and you see what's there. Once you understand properly what's there, you talk to what's there and try and understand what it's good at, what it wants to achieve, what it's hoping to develop in the future. And you nurture that over the long term with a diligent and focused attention on a purpose other than the tawdry manipulation of figures and processes in order to provide some faux presentation of success. Yeah? Why are universities engaging in off-balance sheet transactions? Because they can't borrow any more money in on-balance sheet transactions. And the reason for that is because they're spending money on stuff that doesn't actually matter a great deal, but looks very good in shiny brochures whose sole purpose is to allow them to compete with each other as if there was no higher purpose to what we're engaged in. It's a shambolic state of affairs, and it's only by our solidarity that we'll do anything about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, we got a question on the Facebook chat. It's for Umberto and is from Ross Gillis, who was asking, what is the alternative to funding? Scheme?
I suppose I'm not sure what Ross is referring to, but I presume she's referring what is the alternative to the funding for research. You know, the current system of research funding is a relatively recent one. Okay, I actually think that it is perfectly possible to have something that is good for everybody. And I, first of all, the current system of research funding is a consequence of an incredible centralization of funding, okay? So that basically there are central bodies that allocate funding in different places. I think we should go back to a situation in which there is a certain amount of funding that is allocated for particular units that could be departments or could be faculties, in some cases even universities, but and that are as equally shared as it could be. Within that system, there could be also some room for, let's say, competitive application for funding, but they should be very limited and used in a much less centralized way than it is today. Okay, and like all systems, it will not be perfect. It's not perfection that we're aiming for, and there will always be people who will grumble a little bit about this. But can you imagine what kind of liberation of time and energy would be for academics to know that they don't have to spend most of their research time and energy trying to basically capture grants. If they will have at least a base okay, to work on, I think most of the energy can be used for something which is extremely more productive. Of course, the little details can be discussed, but I think the most fundamental thing is that we need to move away from a system which is highly centralized, in some cases dubious in its integrity, and also a system that leads to absolutely massive waste of time and energy.
All right, thank you very much, Umberto, for your reply. I think it answered the question. Now for our fourth and last speaker of this session, we have a professor of cultural theory and intellectual history at the School of Languages and Cultures and education officer for Sheffield UCU, Craig Brandist. Where is yours?
Okay, thanks very much, and I'll be relatively brief because Simon and Umberto have covered much of the ground that needs to be covered, and so it's a matter of me really supplementing that with some information really about what's been happening in the School of Languages and Cultures, where we're not actually facing closure so much as dismemberment, and I don't think the university really has an agenda on closing languages and cultures, but what it wants, because it wants it to adorn its profile as a research-intensive Russell Group university, but to reduce it down to something that's largely symbolic and running on a shoestring and not really having any great intellectual or pedagogical integrity. And this is a real problem that we're facing at the moment. And it's not really surprising because of this, that when the original proposals that were put forward that we're having to deal with at the moment, they had been kept secret when they were being developed. The only person from the School of Languages and Cultures that was actually involved in drawing up the proposals as they first came out was the head of school, who kept it completely secret from the rest of the department. So we knew nothing about it until it landed on us as a set of proposals to which the vast majority of staff were absolutely horrified. There's no intellectual case, no pedagogical case, and no student support and no staff support for any of the proposals that are being put forward. So the idea is that what they want to do is to separate off languages and cultures into two different units, as if in some way they were at all separable. And this is because the University of Sheffield has a very good modern languages teaching centre, which historically has taught those occasional students who want to pick up, say, a bit of Russian, a bit of French or whatever, as part of their more general overall education in other departments and so on. Whereas the School of Languages and Cultures has been involved in teaching people who are specialists in areas of the foreign languages and cultures, European languages and cultures, and Latin America, obviously languages and cultures as well. But the thing is that what they now want to do is to make sure that they've separated off the language and the culture so that everybody is being taught by the Modern Languages Teaching Centre, and specialist and non-specialist students will be educated together. And this clearly is felt by students, and I think quite rightly, that it will be degrading their specialism and their particular area of study down to an occasional form of study, and it will lose its intellectual coherence. There's no pedagogical rationale for putting together those occasional students and specialist students, and at the same time actually cutting down on the contact hours that specialist students will have in language. This is clearly a material change to the conditions that our students are going to face, but the university, of course, with an eye on the Competition and Marketing Authority, denies it at every stage without actually putting up any evidence that it will actually be compliant under the current circumstances. Staff have repeatedly put forward evidence as to why it does divert from what students have been promised, and that has simply been denied without any counter evidence being presented. There's no staff support for any of these proposals. I have not spoken to a single member of staff who thinks this is a good idea, apart from the head of school. We were not consulted on the projects. The proposals that were put forward were formulated largely by monolingual members of staff who have no real insight into languages and teaching, language teaching at all. The counter proposals that we put together at a very busy time of the year, while we were going through marking and so on, were summarily rejected, and nothing of any significance was adopted from them. Not really surprising, we have staff leaving as a result of complete lack of faith in the coherence of the department now, but also because they can't bear to have their own profiles narrowed in the same way. So those people who are teaching language and culture, many of them who have now been moved into the Modern Languages Teaching Centre, where they can only teach language, they cannot teach culture. So these things have, and vice versa, these things have happened, which has been absolutely horrifying for people in the department. There's no student support for this. There was 300 students wrote letters of complaint. They were just simply rejected. The ethical processes in seeking student opinion on this were violated, were certainly not done in accordance with the ethical principles of the research process within the institution, even though that institution itself clearly, that document itself clearly says that it does apply to those administrative processes, which has now simply been denied by the university. The students, though, are absolutely brilliant. Much as the university has tried to turn them into passive consumers, they have maintained their ability to be critical thinkers. They've gone on their rent strike because they've been treated appallingly over the whole COVID situation. They're extremely supportive of staff. They are absolutely forensic on the proposals that have come through, and they've put in a series of complaints that have just been rebuffed, and now they're considering going to the Office of the Independent Adjudicator and putting in a representation to the Office of Students for the way that they've been treated. As is the case with archaeology, there's no financial case for what they're doing. The cost of cross-subsidy of these units within the institution, given the entire university budget, is negligible. The funding model that has existed is the only reason those departments are in deficit at all. That funding model could be changed. And this is because the real agenda lies everywhere, lies elsewhere. The real agenda is to further centralise and consolidate the narrow bureaucratic control over the university, and to send out a strong message to all departments within the institution that you prioritise income or you face either dismemberment or closure. This is, of course, a sector-wide problem. We've already heard from Leicester and from Liverpool, and the same thing's going on at Leicester, and solidarity to them. But quite clearly, our leadership has no concern for staff. Their professionalism is disregarded. They're treated simply as hired labour who should shut up and do what their bosses tell them to do. There's no real concern for students. They just want them to be cash cows to prop up and quietly go along with the product that they're being delivered to them. They've got no real concern for education. These people don't know really the difference between education and training. They don't really understand that a dog can be trained, a dog cannot be educated. And this is really something that really runs through the whole way that they're looking at it. And the governance failure that's been talked about is absolutely at the centre of all this. We have no accountability. We have toothless representative institutions throughout the university. We have massive hypocrisy from the university over civic responsibility and so on. Clearly, the struggle has to go on. That's down to us, because one of the things that we have to insist on, it's not their university, it's our university. And that means it's the university of the students, it's the university of the staff, it's the university of the city. And only if we get together and we struggle for the future of higher education and for an institution that really does what a university should do, are we going to be able to maintain that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. I've been forwarded a question for you. I will read it out. Has there ever been an answer to why it's acceptable for non-specialist students to pay a much lower fee than the specialist languages students for the same teaching?
It's an obvious question, and no is the answer. It has not been justified, but clearly by putting them together and lowering the amount of contact time and the texture of the different kinds of education that people will be given over language, that is a really important question that needs to be done, because there's no point, and we're not going to attract students if the School of Languages and Cultures appears to them as no more than a very expensive Berlitz academy.
Right, and then another question is, why do these people have so much power? What can we do?
Well, there's been a long process where they've shifted the whole governments and so on in order to be able to prioritise treating the university acting as if it was a business, and that's been the model all along. The only thing we can do is to insist on a democratisation of the institution, of a professionalisation of the institution. And that means that we need a serious governance review of the whole institution. And that's going to have to involve students, staff, and I think representatives from the city more widely as well. That's something that the institution, the bureaucratic centre of the institution is not going to bring about itself. It's something that we're going to have to force them into by our own activities and by building really popular campaigns, of which this is a very important one.
Thank you very much again, and I'll now hand over for the next session on mental health to our former PhD student and current teaching technician and demonstrator in the Department of Archaeology, Angela Maccarinelli, who, by the way, I want to thank because she has been invaluable in the organization of this whole event.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you so much. So I'm just waiting to appear on the screen. So This session is dedicated to the impact that the decision of the Executive Board has had on the mental health of staff and students. So we will leave their messages to talk to you about the gravity of the situation. However, I have to give you a warning, because during this session we are going to talk about depression, anxiety, and also self-harm. So please be kind with yourself, and if you think that this could be too hard to hear, just don't read the messages and close your audio until you will see our Sam Purchase appearing again for the next session. So our first speaker for this session is Matteo Bormetti, is an ex-master student and now a brilliant PhD student of the Department of Archaeology, so as a ZOARC member team. Please remember to use the stream of the chat on Facebook if you want to do questions to the speakers of this session. So thank you, Matteo.
Well, it's me again. Today, I want to talk to you about the impact that this decision, well, you know which one I'm talking about, has had on students' mental health. I will be speaking from my perspective as a PhD student in archaeology, of course, but I know that students on all levels and in both departments will see something of their experiences in what I will say. I personally don't usually feel confident about speaking on behalf of other people, but I had the chance to speak with many of my colleagues and friends here, and I know that we are all sharing a feeling that borders on despair. It is even difficult for me to be here talking about it, but I'm lucky to have some energy left to do it. Not everybody's so lucky. In recent years, studies about the worsening of mental health conditions in the students and early research communities have been multiplying, many published in important journals like Nature. The reasons why are numerous, but discussing all of them here is beyond the point. As you well know, last year the pandemic struck, weakened our support network, sometimes hitting us with fear, grief, and loss, filling us with uncertainty and putting even more pressure on us to complete our projects in an hostile environment that impedes research travel and limits our access to research facilities, collections, and expertise. And just as conditions were slowly turning for the better, university executive board thought it proper to kick us when we were down. Since the end of May, many of us have not been able to sleep properly, and sometimes at all. We find it difficult to focus on our work, and we are just generally anxious and depressed. Sure, we have been promised the university will honor commitments to us, but in what way? We have been repeatedly lied to and ignored. Should we trust their promises? Should we ignore the fact that our mentors and friends in the staff will lose their jobs? Should we be indifferent to the loss of an historically fundamental department that we chose over many others because we thought that there was no other department like it and we would not have been anywhere else? Should we just shrug away the fact that during our future careers elsewhere, the Department of Archaeology will not be there as a beacon, as the home beyond home, where established researchers, Sheffield alumni can always return for guidance and collaboration? In one way or another, we repeatedly ask these questions to management. The reply over and over again, like a broken record, has been that we will be able to finish our degree. Maybe in a different department, you know, or maybe with a different supervisor, but hey, they will help us. And we have access to well-being support, even to a fast track to mental health services. And I say, when people from the faculty repeated their litany during a meeting with PGR students I participated, I was so angry that it made me speechless. All I could think of was the image of somebody stabbing me in my gut and then reassuring me by saying that they had called an ambulance for me. It is good and well for us to have access to counseling, but that is a form of tokenistic support that doesn't fix the problem. What we need are structural problems to be addressed. And you know what? The best help to my mental health I've ever received in all my time as a student has been in the form of support and example from the amazing members of staff that I got to meet here in Sheffield. whilst a major source of anxiety has been seeing them doing their best in a university that overworked them and ignored their needs, to the point that I was feeling guilty asking for their help because I knew they were struggling themselves. University needs to retrace its steps. Not only closure and barbaric restructuration of departments need to be averted, but we need a university that cares first and foremost for education and research, instead of investing money only in the things that make them tick boxes, look good with a sprinkling of meaningless buzzwords. But all of these, of course, would need competent and kind people to be in managerial positions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matteo. That was so powerful. We also got a message from the chat saying there is something persuasive in the culture of upper management at the University of Sheffield, where they never involve those that will actually be affected by their decision. And it's clearly what they are doing. When they take this type of decisions at high level, they forget that they are dealing with people's lives, and that they are not putting weight on the damage that their business-oriented choices are causing on people's mental health. So let's hear more testimonies from staff and students through the voices of Lizzie Wright and Nick Groat.
Thank you, Angela. So Lizzie and I will be reading a few anonymised statements from staff and students in the Department of Archaeology about how the whole process of this review and things like that within that grouping has affected individuals' mental health. And I'd just like to thank in advance those students and staff who've come forward and done the very brave thing to write a little statement about how this has affected them. So this first one is from a member of the archaeology staff. In the wake of a pandemic, the most mentally challenging and difficult situation of our lives, the university created more distress by putting the department under review and then considering its closure. Not only was the timing cruel, pushing our already delicate mental stability to breaking point, they conducted the review and all communications in a very unprofessional and unclear manner. By not being open about the process and the purpose with staff and students, and then by announcing two severe options, one of which was chosen, not only putting staff jobs at risk, but creating more insecurity and instability for students, was ethical and unnecessarily cruel. The university has put staff and students through over 2 months of turmoil and stress by announcing a possible close and by not being transparent about how this would be carried out. This has resulted in staff and students becoming mentally and physically ill with stress and anxiety as they wait to find out when they have a job until, when they have a supervisor or facilities until, and worry about the future of their careers, how they will pay the bills and deal with the fact that they will close connections and opportunities promised to them as alumni of the department. This situation would never be welcome or easy one, but a lot of illness could have been avoided if conducted correctly and fairly, as well as a different outcome.
One is also from a member of staff. Since the beginning of the pandemic 16 months ago, I have published several books and papers, applied for several grants, brought to successful completion 3 of my PhD students, examined 3 PhDs, successfully continued my teaching in the most difficult circumstances, taken 1 week of annual leave, and yet the faculty and university management are treating me like a lazy bastard. Can't go on like this. They are killing us slowly, day by day. They have created a university environment that is toxic and unhealthy. Enough of this. Either we respond or die.
From another member of staff, the stress of what is happening to us is grinding me down. I'm finding it difficult to focus, sleep. I burst into tears many times a day and I'm no longer sure of what I should do with my future. I come from a humble family, worked my ass off in a factory for 2 years to afford a master at Sheffield Archaeology, because Sheffield Archaeology has the best education I could get for my field of study. I got my PhD prizes and recognitions because of the quality of teaching, outstanding supervision, and the high level of education I got here. Now somebody up there is telling me we have to close down because archaeology at Sheffield is not good enough. Do they even know what they're talking about? Why would I have lost 8 years of my life in a place that is not only average, but not even good enough to stand as an independent department?
This is from a PhD student. I'm an international PhD student. Since the review, research projects and other plans that once seemed promising now appear less certain. I used to be so proud to be a Sheffield student. I have the Sheffield flag in my bedroom and wore the university jumper all the time. Now I get a lump in my throat when I see them. I feel betrayed by the one thing that was supposed to be my greatest champion. We worked so hard and sacrificed so much to do our PhDs, and doing them at Sheffield was supposed to mean something. Now I have nightmares about the department closing and wake up to emails from faculty that leave me feeling hollow. This wasn't supposed to be how my PhD ended. I was looking forward to future collaborations, research visits, and the feeling of pride that would come saying, I'm from Sheffield Uni. Now I know convocation will be less about graduating from Sheffield and more about graduating despite it.
Just like to correct myself from earlier, these statements aren't just from the Department of Archaeology, but here's another one from a PhD student. The past 18 months or so have caused a huge challenge to us all. On top of all other pressures the pandemic caused, I've been unable to access material for analysis and unable to access our labs for several months. These issues, along with a major bereavement during lockdown, the isolation caused by mainly working alone from home, have caused stress, anxiety, doubts over whether I could produce a piece of original research to anything like an acceptable standard or within the time limits, and yes, depression. The support and understanding of my supervisor and colleagues and being part of such a wonderful team has helped me immensely. Then along came the UEB review and subsequent recommendation, which at this point in time, when we are all suffering the consequences of the pandemic, is nothing short of barbaric. This is not to mention the underhand way they have conducted the review and the plain fact that they have seem unanswerable to no one, despite the multiple times we have challenged their methods and motives. So I'm now faced with the possibility of the loss of my brilliant and supportive supervisor, a lab in which to work, and the excellent reference collection we have, which is so crucial to my research. This has pretty much tipped me over the edge. I have no focus, I can't sleep, I feel helpless and hopeless. I don't know how these people sleep at night.
This is from a master's student. UEB's decision of closing the Department of Archaeology arrived in the most unfair period for all the students, spring end term. We had already faced so many issues during the last 2 years with the pandemic, and at that moment we needed a more peaceful and safe environment to terminate our university path. Of course, this decision and the way it was taken impacted tremendously the overall exam grades and, most importantly, our mental health. Personally, during my period at the Uni of Sheffield, I had to face several personal and professional issues, among them the pressure put on students, for which I had to ask for a leave of absence for 1 year. When I heard that one of the UEB representatives compared students to grocery products, I felt mortified, as I suppose did all my colleagues and all our professors. Speaking of which, I must say that I have never found such amazing staff and professors, and the saddest part is that the future students would never know how amazing it was to study archaeology at the University of Sheffield.
As a self-funded student, I am proud and happy to work hard for the upkeep of my studies. Studying at Sheffield provided me with an optimistic outlook on my future goals and career, but the proposal of the University Executive Board to close the Department of Archaeology creates havoc, not only for my academic career, but also for my mental health. The incomprehensible push to decimate a world-leading international and welcoming department undermines everything I valued at the University of Sheffield. Adding to my change of perception is the unwillingness and incapability of university administration to engage with students openly and without deceit. I was happy to contribute to a university for the people, but I am disgusted by the repetitive and most cynical pseudo-reassurances of processes being in place and mental well-being services being available. With the pandemic having a major impact on mental health, and being deceived and instrumentalized can bring the most resilient person to their limit. Adding untransparent answers to our concerns shows the dismissive nature of university management and leaves students and staff's mental health in the air. Trading the optimistic futures of students, staff, and the wider community for untransparency, deceit, and ultimately greed is unworthy of the University of Sheffield.
from undergraduate student. I've struggled with mental health issues for a large portion of my life, and the effect the pandemic has had made things much more difficult for me, especially regarding my studies and mental health. The first time in many years, I began to self-harm, and over the Christmas period, I hit a low that I had not been to since my father died. And just when I began to feel like I was getting back on my feet, I received word out of the blue via email that it was likely my department would be closed. I cannot understate the betrayal and sadness I felt. Why now, during the worst crisis this country has faced in decades, despite assurances that all current students will be able to complete their degree, I feel lost, unmotivated, and frankly, extremely angry. I joined this department as a mature student. I worked hard to even get myself into a position to be able to come to Sheffield on my own and study archaeology, a subject I have always wanted to study and intended to make into a career. When I received the call that I had been accepted onto a foundation year course to continue onto archaeology, I was genuinely ecstatic. And now I feel the university upper management are trying to rip that away from me and my fellow students. I never had a say in this decision, nor my course mates, nor the staff in the department. I just fail to understand why the university has decided to do this now. At this point, I don't even know if I want to continue with my studies at Sheffield anymore.
This is from a PhD student. When I first heard our department was under review, I was naive enough to not be fully alarmed. I thought, what could they do to a world-leading department? Then, when they first announced their decision, I was shell-shocked. I couldn't believe it, but I thought I had to get it back together, and after a couple of days, I'll be able to focus on my studies, and therefore focus on something that I love. Just work through the stress or pain. But little did I know. Since the UEB announced actions against our department, it feels like everything has come to a halt. Like the rug was pulled away from under my feet. Each day when I should just be happy and thankful that I can pursue my studies and do something I love, even during a pandemic, all I can feel is sadness, disgust, anger, helplessness, and stress. All of that only because the UEB decided against us, because they are unable to see our contribution onto society and our research worth. There are days when I feel optimistic, only to receive another email from the university containing misinformation, misleading, or partial information. I feel unheard. No matter how loud we are shouting, the university does not look our way. It makes me feel so helpless when the university says there are plans in place to get rid of the supervisors we had deliberately chosen and who are world leading on their respective fields of research. As a PhD student, I deliberately entrusted my academic life and career to the University of Sheffield. I trusted them to give me and our department a proper place of research and teaching. But now I just feel betrayed because some people higher up have decided that we are not good enough anymore. We're just a product that they want to get rid of.
Thank you so much, Lizzie and Nick, for doing this for us. We know this probably was quite hard for you to do as well. Anyway, now we have a support and solidarity message from Brian Holmshaw. Brian?
Hello there. Hi, I'm just unmuting. Oh, good. Glad the audio is working. The Green Group of Councillors on Sheffield City Council, of which I am one, and there are 13 of us now, we'd like to express our solidarity with the Arts and Humanities campaign to save, in particular, I'm going to focus on archaeology and the archaeology labs. It's absolutely scandalous that this is being allowed to go ahead. And it's very distressing to hear of the impact this has had on the mental health of arts, humanities and archaeology students. Because I'm speaking here not just to the newly elected Green Councillor, but as one of the Green Councillors for Broomhill and Sherrow Vale. And that's where many archaeology students live and study. And these students are going to be the ones dispossessed of the very subjects that they care so passionately about. They've studied hard at them. They want to participate in them and they want to enjoy them. And none of this is happening. We all three local councillors say the department must not close. The site of university buildings, the Ella Armitage buildings, is also represented by Green councillors, all three of whom have been very vocal in condemning this action. And it's those students and future students who are going to suffer, and it's those who are protesting against. There are, however, some major institutions that are not challenging this, And I would ask that the campaign can perhaps focus on this. It may help you. It may help you, and may help you be successful. So the Sheffield City region have not spoken out against this, despite being contacted and asked to do so by the campaign. So we're yet to hear from Sheffield City region, who have some very important delegated powers over culture and heritage, which is worth getting in touch with them again about. And I want to ask the South Yorkshire Mayor, Dan Jarvis, to come aboard and support this campaign also. The City region needs to speak out and to join Sheffield City Council, because this closure is not just going to affect students and university lecturers in Sheffield, but in those living in other areas of South Yorkshire, in Barnsley, in Doncaster, in Rotherham and further afield. What chance are those people going to have of experiencing the real power of local history, of a community dig on their doorstep, and of seeing their own material culture open up in front of their eyes? There will be very little of this in future. However, the real heart of this is you, the archaeologist, the future archaeologist, graduates, postgraduates and lecturers. It's only just not now and into the future that this is going to affect. It's a deep insult, as far as I can see, to all those researchers and practitioners who came before you. They worked hard to establish such a powerful and deep legacy of archaeological practice in Sheffield. And it's hard to credit that university is making this move. My career up to now has been as a heritage professional. I've worked in museums and I've worked as a further education lecturer in local history. So I'm deeply embedded in this. I wouldn't have been able to function without the bedrock of archaeological practice in Sheffield. It's underpinned my work, and it's clear that the whole heritage sector has been rocked by cuts and job losses. So I can understand your pain at the crass insensibility and barbarism of what the university is doing. I see it within a context of loss and removal of educational opportunity. It's systematic damage to our cultural heritage. It's a loss of precious buildings and landscapes to what I see as a development crazy mentality. The university has painted itself into a corner with this. No one is seriously coming out to support them. Where are they? Well, they're not. And I say to the university, perhaps we should all say to them that there is no shame in backing down, even at this moment. The shame is going to come when we look back on the loss of this asset of education. I think you should turn this decision around, University of Sheffield. So fight on, my friends, fight on.
Thank you so much, Brian. In the meanwhile, we got also a comment in the chat about the University of Leicester. They say students have been in unsafe accommodation to the point people have been hospitalized due to dangerous mold issues, and the uni has offered minimal to no compensation and not fixed the problem. They have sent external bailiffs against students behind on rent. They have refused to let international students out of rent contracts despite not being able to get the country this year, and students have been intimidated against speaking out. So our next and final speaker for this session is Dr. Mark Pendleton, a person who has worked greatly on the organization of this event. So Mark is a senior lecturer in Japanese studies. He's the director of postgraduate research at the School of East Asian Studies, studies which took him to travel all over the world, from Melbourne to Japan to Sheffield. But he is also member and secretary of the Sheffield branch of the University College Union, so as the faculty representative on the university's Gender Equality Committee. So Mark?
Thanks so much, Angela. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I had prepared a bit of a speech, but I'm just conscious we've got lots and lots of other people to hear from, and as messages of support and so on to read and to hear. So I wanted to just stress that over the last 18 months, I think what we've seen at the University of Sheffield is absolutely the best and the worst of what the university is. And the best is what we can see in the stories that we're hearing today from our colleagues in archaeology, in SLC, and from students, a culture of mutual care and respect, a valuing of education, a commitment to research, to ethics, to honesty and integrity. And that, I think, has really come to the fore through the actions of staff and students over the last 18 months, through what's been a really horrendous period. And on the converse, we've seen a management that has forgotten those values. In the last year at this university, we've seen initially last summer an attempt to fire all 8,000 plus staff and rehire on worse terms and conditions. Once that was defeated, the university then decided to shift its focus to individual processes of restructures and reviews, and then a wholesale portfolio review of undergraduate programs. The question I guess we want to ask is what's happened to those people who've gone to those positions of authority? Where are those values of the institution, of a university that we all hold dear? And I guess what I wanted just to say is that, I got involved in trade unionism partly because I believe in those values. And what we've seen over the last couple of months in particular with the campaign around SLC and around archaeology is how those values can really inform the kinds of university that we want to maintain and to reclaim and rebuild out of what we have become. And so all credit really to the staff and students of the School of Languages and Cultures and Archaeology. You have been driving this campaign in a massively impressive way. The volume of responses we've seen today and across the campaign is a real testament to the work that you've done to build and to activate the communities that you are deeply embedded in. And those are the communities that this institution should be valuing and prioritising. So I guess I've just got a message of support here, which comes from Justine Mercer, who's the UCU Vice President, on behalf of all of the officers of the National Union. She says, I'm writing to offer solidarity to Sheffield UCU in their fight against the wholesale closure of the Department of Archaeology and against job losses in the School of Languages and Cultures. This is an act of vandalism by senior managers who have no idea about the true value of the arts and humanities. The national officers stand shoulder to shoulder with you, and we will do all we can to support your members. So that comes from the National Union, but I wanted to also just stress that locally, the UCU branch has been meeting regularly with our colleagues in Unison and Unite. We've had regular discussions in our branch meetings, and we are not giving up this fight. We have consistently said to the university precisely what Brian said in his previous speech. True leaders know when they've made a mistake and walk their way back from it. This is a wholesale error on all the grounds that we've talked about in this meeting. There is still time to walk back from it and get back into the room and talk openly and honestly about what kind of support the Department of Archaeology and the Faculty of Arts and Humanities needs to continue to thrive and grow. On Monday, Council makes that decision. We are ready to activate the next steps in the campaign the following day if the wrong decision is made. But I hope and I strongly encourage council members who may be listening or people who have access to as council members to encourage them to reject the recommendation from UEB and to invest and support the Department of Archaeology. We'll continue to be by your side and we'll be back in touch as soon as we know anything that comes out of the meeting on Monday. But full solidarity from all the campus trade unions and we, as I said, the fight continues well after today.
Thank you so much, Mark. With this, we are going to leave the word to our Sam Purchase again with some support solidarity messages.
Thank you, Angela. So we'll now hear messages of solidarity from our colleagues and friends. To our speakers sharing these messages, please introduce yourselves as we go, as some of our messages are pre-recorded from friends who couldn't be here today, but wanted to send their messages of support. Our first message comes from Steve Wilkinson. If Steve is here, I might have caught him off guard.
Yeah, I've just unmuted.
Perfect,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've not prepared anything. I'm just really impressed with what I've heard here today and was really shocked to hear of what was happening at Sheffield. I used to teach there and I'm from head of chemical engineering from the University of Chester. I'd just like to say we support you with showing solidarity. And we have an event in Chester on the 24th of July, which will be attended by the UCU President Joe Grady, where we're looking to sort of widen our campaign and show solidarity with other universities. And we've won our fight to some extent at Chester, but we see this as a bigger fight with all our colleagues elsewhere. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Our next speaker is Ruth Milson.
Thank you. Caught me slightly off guard. I'm here to offer solidarity on behalf of Labour councillors in Sheffield. I'm a Labour councillor in Crooks and Cross Pool ward, where of course we have a high population of students, academics and other university staff all across the ward, and it's a really vibrant culture. And I mean, just absolutely devastating to hear the news of these two particular departments under threat. But I really want to highlight how endemic and systemic this is across the sector. And it seems to me that different universities, different institutions are applying the same principles, but in different ways. And I've seen elsewhere with colleagues, and my husband teaches in higher education as well. Some places are going for the sort of salami slicing, cut some hours here, cut a bit of admin there, cut a bit of budget here, and others just seem to go straight up front, like Sheffield, with the closure of a department. I think it's dangerous, of course, to look back when you're over the hill like me, to look back at a sort of golden age of higher education when one was at university. But I do think it's true. And, you know, I hark back to my 3 years at Sheffield as a music student, and it really was a golden age. And our, particularly what strikes me is that our teaching staff were free to give excellent teaching without being mired in bureaucracy and worrying about cuts every 2 minutes, and that they were free to pursue research on their own timescale. And there was some truly excellent research that happened. You know, some of it went on over years and years. There was no ref to answer to. There were no demands for, you know, renewing funding bids every few years. And it was a job for life for academics in my day. I hate to use that phrase, but I really do think that's true. And it's been really distressing to see how everything's come under attack through years of neoliberal administration. It's just been so persistent. So I just want to offer solidarity from the council, and what, you know, if I don't know if there's anything that can be done in terms of the city council, you know, voicing its opinion or trying to work with the university. But these are issues that affect the whole city, and particularly my ward. So I'll leave it at that. I won't ramble on, but just to offer whatever support we can, really, and solidarity. And I hope we win this case against the university. Quite frankly, it just shouldn't happen.
Thank you so much, Ruth. We really appreciate your words. I'm going to read a few more words actually from our Facebook comments that Marion's been very diligently copying for us. This one comment says, the non-executives must be poor to allow this strategy, and their scrutiny non-existent. Facebook attendees sending support from Denmark, Australia, Norway, Spain, Germany, and Portugal, as well as the UK. And this other comment says, this line of process being in place and mental well-being services being available is exactly the language or phrasing used at University of Chester during the current redundancy process. If they really cared about staff and student well-being, they would not be trying to make staff redundant during a pandemic. It's true. Our next speaker, or our next message of solidarity, comes from Mike Drabble.
Thank you, Samantha. My name's Councillor Mike Drabble. I'm the Sheffield City Council Heritage Champion, and like Ruth, a representative of the Labour Group of Councillors on Sheffield City Council. And because of my position, although I do offer solidarity to people here who work in modern languages, I'm going to concentrate on archaeology. One thing I've been struck throughout this process is the amount of representation I've received from heritage groups and individuals across the city. regarding the proposed closure of this department. For those from elsewhere who are unaware, Sheffield Archaeology Department has an excellent record of integration within the city. And many of these groups are aghast that this connection will be threatened. And I think there's a parallel story going on here as well, in that there have been an increasing number of voices within the city of Sheffield that are saying that the University of Sheffield is turning into a separate and remote institution that does not care for the concerns of the majority of Sheffielders. Now, I happen to, in the past, to have not agreed with that. I view the University of Sheffield as actually a vital institution that's, kind of can play a part in the continuing success and prosperity and cultural life of this city. But I have to say, I think with the closure of departments like archaeology, like modern languages, and the continued assaults that we're witnessing, I think the university are treading on very dangerous ground, because they are starting to imperil the connection between this city and the university. I urge them, as a people who have made this decision, to reconsider and give those of us who see the university as being a vital part of the city, succor in our attempts to foster this relationship. They can turn back, and as others have said, it is certainly no disgrace to do so. So I'm here to say, Sheffield City Council Heritage Champion, I oppose this decision. Many of us do also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate those words, especially from the Heritage Champion. We have another comment here from Facebook. Ooh, the chat moves very quickly. There we go. They say, note that archaeology and heritage needs to be in the Environment Bill. This may be one of the political drivers that the university management are following. There is a clear government strategy that says it isn't important. We have another comment here from Facebook that says, I have no doubt they meant this whole process to be as barbaric as possible, because they intended to destroy the department for some time before the pandemic, the same as Chester. The plans were laid out by management well in advance. There's a thread throughout academia, especially regarding archaeology, but humanities in general. They truly don't care at all. That's why we need to fight. The one good thing is that when you know where you stand and you can begin to fight back and you know who your friends are. I completely feel this, the mental health thread. I was so proud to be a Sheffield alumni, but with all of this, I feel dirty for wearing my University of Sheffield shirt. Thank you so much for all of your words in the chat. Please keep them coming. Our next speaker is Douglas Johnson.
Well, morning, everyone. I'm sorry for not having a prepared speech here. This has all been a bit hectic, but I'm glad to be able to speak to people today, and more important, to hear what everyone else has said. I'm Douglas Johnson. I'm another of the Green Councillors. I'm also, since the recent elections, one of the executive members of the council, and my area of responsibility is climate change, environment and transport. But I just want to speak on behalf of my colleague, Councillor Paul Turpin, and he's the executive member for economy, jobs and skills of the council. And in that capacity, because it's a very serious threat to the level of skills and jobs both in the city now, but also for many years into the future. So we asked the university prior to the University Executive Board meeting that we have a meeting with them so they can explain their rationale for this really drastic and unwarranted cut. And of course, the university management declined that. They said that their response was based on objective reviews from the paper that was drawn up and shared with the board. So we asked them if they would share that with us to possibly explain why they were thinking of taking this step. And they've also declined to share this. So it's internal and confidential. So they're sure they're making absolutely the right decision, but they're not willing to explain why that is. And it does sound flippant. It is a serious note that this is a formal request from Sheffield City Council we're in that capacity now to make that request. And this is the university at the highest level declining to do that. And I mentioned that in the context of Liberty Steel in Stocksbridge was also looking at a situation where it was looking to make redundancies, and it was very keen to engage with the council as the local authority in the area in order to discuss what the impact would be. So it is very disappointing that we have a university that ought quite rightly to position itself as being a world-leading university based right in the heart of Sheffield. And I think it's just very difficult to convey the level of disappointment that I hold at their response. So I'm going to leave that there. It's far better to hear from the other people who will be most directly affected by it. So thank you for taking part in this, everyone.
Thank you very much, Douglas. We have another Facebook message here. It says that, note that archaeology and heritage needs to be, oh, no, that's the one I've already read. Oop, it's moved already. We're just so active. Here we are. So many testimonials to the value and impact of the department. I really hope a solution can be found. Attacks on the arts and culture in our society are short-sighted and make us all poor. I completely agree. Our next speaker is Howard Williams.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm a professor of archaeology at the University of Chester, as was Steve, but I'm an archaeologist. And I want to use this opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity, to show my support and solidarity, but also to explain something of the situation we've been facing at Chester, because it is both very similar but also distinctively different. It was on the 1st of April, Maundy Thursday, in the evening, that we received after a grueling 13-month pandemic teaching load, as Sheffield colleagues will understand, we received an at-risk of redundancy notification, both me and my colleagues, via an HR email address, without irony, euphemistically called simply change. Without review, warning, clear rationale or details, we got this message, and I thought it was a spam message, perhaps an April Fool by a colleague. Then I realised, no, it was actually from our HR department. A week then went by without hearing anything else. We learned that there was additional staff across the university also identified at risk. But within our unit, our pool, we had 7 staff, 4 archaeologists, 2 heritage specialists, and 1 random historian was also identified in our pool at risk of redundancies. And they were hoping to sack 2 of us from that pool of 7. It seems on a 2-year slight dip in recruitment as their only rationale. UCU consultation and support found no clear financial logic from the university, and we can only surmise that it's a new VC wanting to stamp her authority and a flaccid middle management unwilling to challenge or propose robust responses to that new VC. Managers refused to meet us. There were thinly veiled threats issued. There was a range of external supporters were accused of reputational damage to us by actually speaking out in our support, and even of being sexist by daring to question the decisions of a female vice-chancellor. And we were chided directly by senior management for not understanding why our jobs were at risk. There was basically a false narrative back projected saying that we'd always known this was going to happen, and we'd known it for 16 months, apparently. Obviously, this was all exhausting and upsetting for staff and students, crippling our morale, divisive between colleagues, created, as we've heard from Umberto, a similar toxic working environment, and it rapidly eroded our personal and family relationships, our mental health, affecting both staff and students. But having said that, we rapidly decided to fight back. They used the Easter break deliberately, I think, to create a stall and a shock. But we decided to fight back, and with the support of colleagues from elsewhere in the humanities and elsewhere in the university and a superb UCU branch, we bolstered a campaign involving external letters of support, students writing in our support, a petition which garnered 6,600 signatures, active on social media, and a WordPress site to showcase our teaching and research. Now, all of this abruptly ended on the 18th of June, when we got another email from that account of HR called Change, telling us we were no longer at risk. And line managers within hours claiming it was their victory. We should be thankful of their interventions for that change, not the work of our union and the work of our campaign. Now, we are very grateful for the solidarity and support we've received, but it's a bit of a hollow victory for us, as these things always are. There's no accountability, no communication, no explanation. We feel betrayed by the university management, and I think the students feel betrayed by Chester Student Union, who have been conspicuous in their absolute silence. They have refused to stand up and support the students whose department staff have been facing cuts. So pathetic situation. We've had no clarification, no meetings subsequent to the 18th of June. So it's a hollow victory. We've now had a series of threats trotted out to us that we're going to lose research leave, lose all money from PGR income, we'll stay with the centre, and on and on. A threat of hot desking and vague personal threats and a genuine continuance of that feeling of toxic environment. Now, that is all. I explain all that because there are similarities, but also differences from Sheffield. And I want to sort of set out a point that our university is now looking for anyone that claims that we were externally, that we were threatened with closure, misunderstanding the difference between staff reductions and closure. They'll be using that as evidence moving forward to justify any downturn in student recruitment as our fault, and perhaps to enact that closure. So we're very fearful that anything too close to the equation with the Sheffield situation will be used against us. So any student who happens to say anything on social media, it'll be suddenly, oh, well, you know, people are confusing the situation. But we stand by Sheffield. I'm a Sheffield undergraduate back in the day. I'm furious at the situation that staff and students have been put through. And I've been, you know, touched and upset personally to hear the stories and the voices we've been hearing earlier today. But I can only echo the thoughts and sentiments of so many supporters, including Umberto. And I want to close with a few points to take forward, because I think we shouldn't let, point one, we shouldn't let the threats, the callousness, the casual disregard stop us from speaking out, whether we're students or staff. Two, don't wait for others to step forward. Management thrive on inaction, and you have to individually, whatever your situation, speak up where you can, how you can in support. Three, don't underestimate your union, the power of them, but also the power of voices, not only from your own discipline, but we found our supporters from other disciplines, from literature and language scholars, historians, anthropologists, from amateurs and enthusiasts, have really hit home and rattled our senior management. They didn't expect all that. And so thank you all. Four, don't think Chester and Sheffield will be the last call. Over the years, I've heard again and again from other academics, they feel with an illusion of security that they're not going to be under threat. We've seen Hull, we've seen Bangor, we've seen what's in archaeology, that is, Leicester in medieval English literature. We've seen attack, and I still talk to colleagues who feel it's not going to affect me. It's not going to affect me. I don't need to say anything. And for all the support, there are conspicuous silences in the academic community. I could call out, but I won't because I'm nice. But Sheffield, we're with you, is my point five. My point five is that strategies and motives vary between institutions, right? But we've all heard about the broader picture. And finally, that Sheffield, we are with you, and not just as fellow academics, but around the world, because your plight touches us all. The discipline, cognate disciplines, we're all part of this struggle because it matters. Not only the past matters, not only your jobs matter, but this is a bigger narrative, yeah? And we've all heard that through today, that this is about our culture, our society, and it's about our future, not just our past. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Howard. I think you do a really good job of summarizing kind of the general trend across the UK right now in universities. And I think our solidarity amongst us definitely makes a huge impact in that regard. In the chat, we've had messages of solidarity from Cardiff while you spoke. We also have another comment on Facebook here that says, the university system is broken. It's clear that they work on a top-down perspective. Those at the top can sack those below them, but how do those below them sack above them? The university should be bottom-up, built around the students and staff working in their best interests. What do those at the top bring to the university? Are they value for our money? I definitely think that's something we're all going to be wondering for the next little while. Our next speaker is Keith Knuckles.
Thanks, Samantha, and thanks everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Keith Knuckles. I'm one of the committee members of Leicester UCU. I'm the rep for the library and one of the reps for academic related staff. And I bring greetings and solidarity from Leicester. I say I bring greetings from Leicester. I'm actually sitting in my house across Hillsborough Park from Sheffield Wednesday, so I'm not too far away from you. I'm a resident of the city and have that interest in things too. I'm so sorry to hear of the stresses on colleagues and students at Sheffield caused by what's happening, and they mirror, I think, what I know is happening to colleagues at Leicester. So you're not alone and you shouldn't feel alone. I've heard much that mirrors what's happening at Leicester. I think there are definitely, as other people have said, themes in all of this. So late last year, we were told at the University of Leicester of plans called Shaping for Excellence. There's always words like shaping, isn't it, and excellence. And those plans would help us move into our second century. We were founded as a kind of living war memorial to the people of Leicester and Leicestershire and Rutland, who died in the First World War. We were founded in 1921. So we have that sort of link with our city, which I think is also under threat. There were consultation meetings in November in some academic departments and some professional services departments. But then on the first day of teaching in January this year, colleagues in 5 academic departments, including English and business, but also some sciences, and 3 professional services departments, including one section of the library, were told of plans that affected them. Those plans included 145 people at risk of redundancy. And there wasn't really any evidence that anything had been taken into account from the consultations that had been held late last year. So some academic colleagues were told that their research no longer fits the university strategy, the college strategy, we call our faculties colleges, or the department strategy. But what those strategies actually are is not very obvious. Some colleagues have been moved to teaching only contracts, not able to do research. Others have taken very heavily promoted voluntary severance. In the end, 26 colleagues were served with notice of redundancy. The university, of course, promotes this as progress and evidence that they listen to suggestions. Maybe in the library with my colleagues, they did a little bit, but in other departments, I don't think they did really at all. And we estimate as a union that over 100 colleagues have taken that voluntary severance or found posts elsewhere or just left. 3 departments in professional services, including another bit of the library, are still waiting to know what's going to happen. They've become a phase 2 of the plans. They had one meeting back in October, and nothing since then beyond promises that there would soon be news, there would soon be progress, but so far there hasn't been. So I think there are patterns. There's patterns in things like, why is this happening now in a pandemic? There's announcements being made out of the blue. There's reassurances, as we've noted, that there are processes in place and that there's support. There's questions about the nature of all those processes. There's senior leadership who don't listen. There's no obvious rationale. There's no involvement of staff who actually understand the area in question. There's no consultation with students. There's attacks on academic freedom and research. This list has been getting longer as this morning has gone on. I have to say, I've been adding to it. There's impact on flourishing areas of work. There's impact on the reputation of the university, and there's detriment to students. And of course, there's loss of jobs through redundancy and loss of people through them leaving and going elsewhere. So we at Leicester UCU, we send our solidarity to you at Sheffield. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keith. I really appreciate that. While we load our next message, because it's a pre-recorded message from Olivia Blake, I would like to highlight this one message in the chat. It comes from a colleague from Beirut. They say, if we can stay open in the face of catastrophic economic collapse, the powers that be in Sheffield clearly don't care about education. We would also like to note that we have colleagues here from Switzerland and Canada. Thank you for being here. All right, this is our message from Olivia Blake.
Hi, I'm Olivia Blake, Member of Parliament for Sheffield Hallam, and I wanted to send my full solidarity to everyone today. I know that this must be a really, really difficult time for a lot of people, whether they're students, academics, or PhD students at the Archaeology department. We've seen a sustained attack on arts and humanities across the board from the central government, and I'm really disappointed that the university hasn't listened to the concerns of students and staff alike on this issue. I wanted to wish you all the best in your campaign, and I think it's been a fantastic campaign which has had far-reaching achievements and getting worldwide press coverage. So well done for keeping up the fight. I think that we need to consider how we can campaign against this attack on arts and humanities subjects more widely, and I would wish you all the best in your campaign efforts and stand in solidarity with you.
Wonderful. Oh, we also have people from the US here as well who'd like to know or like to let us know that they're standing in solidarity with us. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it, especially since it's probably quite early. So thank you. Our next speaker is David Orton.
Thanks, Samantha. Can you hear me okay? Good, okay. So I'm here to offer support from the Department of Archaeology at the University of York. I canvassed opinions, got comments from UCU members in the department in particular, which is the vast majority of us, in fact. But in fact, pretty much everybody in the department is vocally supportive of the Sheffield Archaeology department. And of course, this is not anything special about York. We've heard from various other universities across the country already. We've heard about the letters that have poured in from around the world. At the last demo, we had people came up all the way from Cardiff to Sheffield in order to join in and show support. And of course, all of this might seem rather odd from the perspective of management, by whose logic places like York and Sheffield in particular should really be bitter rivals, around the same kind of places in the rankings, whatever you think of them, and fairly local. And I want to make 2 points about this. The first of these is that archaeology in the UK is very much a community. And of course, there are disagreements here and there. Not everybody gets on. But fundamentally, we share a lot of values. We respect each other. We enjoy each other's successes. And we basically believe in what we do as a discipline and the importance of archaeology as a discipline. And this kind of attack on some of us is an attack on all of us. And that's how this has been received, certainly. We need to stick together. And so that's what we're doing. Secondly, it is true in a sense that university departments in general, including archaeology, do, in a sense, compete for students. But this idea of competition, treating it that way, really treats students as kind of a commodity, something that's homogenous, that can be measured and traded. And that, of course, couldn't be further from the truth or how any of us as actual academics think about students. Students are, of course, individuals who each bring different things to a department. And likewise, each department will best suit different students, just as there is no single best department, there is no single best student. It's not just a matter of which department can get the most, or indeed can get the best, whatever that means, students. And in this kind of context, Professor Valentine's comments about ALDI students are obviously offensive. But they also betray a fundamentally wrong-headed approach to running a university in the first place, an approach which clearly has done serious damage over recent years to archaeology at Sheffield, a department which, lest we forget, once had a proud reputation for taking students from what might be considered less traditional academic backgrounds, something which management has since done its best to squash. And this leads me on to the final point that I want to make today, which is that there has been a lot of talk about past glories at Sheffield, and indeed there are many past glories at Sheffield. I never actually went to Sheffield. I very nearly did twice. It was kind of actually my preference for undergraduate university, but there were reasons why I didn't go there in the end. But of course, Sheffield Archaeology also has a lot of present glories, which talk of past glories might unintentionally obscure somewhat. And as a zooarchaeologist myself, the first of these that comes to mind is, of course, the phenomenal zooarchaeology group that Umberto has built at Sheffield, Umberto Albarella, on foundations laid previously by Paul Halstead. And I single this out just because it's the example I know about. And it leads on to a point about management, and that it's no exaggeration to say that this is one of, if not the leading group in that subdiscipline in the world. And yet the University Executive Board seems a little confused about what osteoarchaeology at Sheffield is even entails. There appears to be some odd ambiguity about whether it just involves humans or animals or both or whatever. And it seems incredible. How can it be that university management, even after a supposedly exhaustive review, could be proposing such a major change based on what appears to be a breathtaking ignorance of what actually goes on within the archaeology department, what it actually does? And I'm sure the osteoarchaeology situation is not the only case in which the management don't really know what's going on. And I'd like to finish by pointing out that this is really quite emblematic of the wider problem in UK higher education, as various previous speakers have pointed out, that senior management are increasingly a law unto themselves, completely detached from the rest of us, not only out of touch, which is perhaps to be expected, honestly, but often, frankly, not even interested in being in touch, not even interested in the real business of what a university does, which is primarily training, teaching and training, because I'm trying to make that point, it's not training, teaching and research, amongst other things, but only, in fact, interested in the bottom line and in their own careers. Quite happy to act against the interests of both staff and students simultaneously if it suits them to do so. Quite frankly, there has been what you might consider a slow motion coup in British universities over the past decades. And it's about time that we reminded them of who universities really belong to. And I think one of the previous speakers said this probably more eloquently than I will manage, but they belong to, in no particular order, staff, students, and local communities, not to executive boards who are supposed to be the people who we pay to take care of the boring administration, not to actually set what a university is all about. That's me.
Thank you, David. I think those are really good words to end on. They resonate really well. Our next speaker joins us. His name is James Whitley.
Okay, my perspective on this is slightly different. I mean, I am obviously at Cardiff University. Many of the things that David has been pointing out, the kind of trends of managerialism are equally evident here in Cardiff University, where there is an obsession about building big shiny buildings whose purpose is completely opaque to us, except that they have large atria and they almost invariably have a Costa Coffee franchise, which gives you a sense of what management's priorities actually is. And this does seem to be a trend everywhere. And previous remarks from colleagues in Leicester are also felt here in Cardiff, despite the fact that we are in under a different regime, in that we're under the Welsh government rather than the UK government in terms of higher education policy. But my perspective on this is my memory of the impact that Sheffield Archaeology had in Greece when I was director of the British School at Athens. And many of the things that were done in Athens in collaboration with Greek colleagues would have been impossible without the input from colleagues from Sheffield. We've mentioned Paul Halstead. Glynis Jones would be another person. Peter Day would be another person. John Bennett, who's now director of the British School at Athens, will be another person. All these people had a huge impact on the landscape of Greek archaeology. And universities like Thessaloniki and Crete and even Athens felt the effects of this. So this is something that resonates across the world, this Philistine and Pharisaic managerialism that is being practiced by the leaders of Sheffield University is being felt across the world. And they just don't seem to care. And this is the most perplexing, I think, aspect of the whole thing. The fact that management don't seem to care. They just seem to care about their own narratives of success. They don't seem to care about what's true or false. They don't seem to care about that at all. They don't seem to care about the idea of a university as a community of scholars, scientists, and students who have a common aim in trying to find the truth about things. They care about big shiny buildings. They care about their own reputations. They care about rankings, and that's it. And they seem to think that you can separate out the scholarship side of archaeology and the science side of archaeology as if they were two entirely separate things, which all of us who work in archaeology know is false. So, we are all in this together. And I just want to express my solidarity with colleagues in Sheffield and colleagues in Leicester and elsewhere. This seems to be a very, very sinister trend that is affecting all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for your international perspective that really highlights how these sorts of decisions have an impact that resonates globally. Our next is a recorded message. It comes from Filippo Venturini. We seem to have some technical issues on Filippo's message, so we'll come back to that. We'll move right along then to our next speaker. This is Charlotte Prime.
Hello everyone, I'm Charlotte Prime and I'm a first-year student studying modern languages and cultures at the University of Sheffield. Part of the reason which attracted me to Sheffield was their unique degree structure, as there I could freely study 3 languages. So I chose to do French and Spanish post-A level, and I picked up Italian from beginner's level. So I've experienced both SLC teaching and MLTC teaching, and both are very unique, and they are both, all the teaching staff are very driven and enthusiastic, and I've loved all of the seminars and lectures that I've attended so far. So obviously, despite the pandemic, I've still managed to really enjoy first year. And then we received the email that our course was going to be completely changed. And I just remember feeling so shocked and angry, because this course wasn't, if these changes were to be implemented, then this wouldn't have been what I signed up for. And it just felt like my future was on the line. And just the sheer lack of communication after that email was quite shocking, until the working group did eventually set up an online meeting with students to talk about the proposed changes. And since then, they did promise to communicate more, but we've only just received an email from them, which explains, not in very much detail, what the next changes are going to be. So there's still quite a bit of confusion about what changes are actually going to be implemented in September or not. And I'd just like also to mention, just thank you to everyone who was here today and for all the messages of solidarity. It really means a lot to us.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's really great to hear you speak today, and thank you for being brave enough to speak in front of so many people. Your words mean a lot and they resonate, and now everyone has heard them, and I think that's very important. So good job for you as well. All right, our next message is Filippo Venturini.
Good morning. My name is Filippo Venturini from Urbino University. We are on the site of Forum Semproni. You can see the Roman road at my shoulders. And in the past years, archaeologists from Sheffield gave us a great helping hand working here. So if you close, it will be a great loss. And I will come looking for you.
Oh, fantastic. I think as a close, it really goes to highlight the stretch and the breadth of this sort of research and all the different places around the world where people who have been to Sheffield now work, and where the people who work within our departments then go on to work. the closure of our department, the restructuring of SLC really does have a global impact. So thank you to all of our speakers who came out to support us today. I think all your messages have highlighted the value of the arts and humanities and the impact of these proposed changes on students, staff, the university, the local community, the UK, and as we've said, I don't think it's an overstatement to say the world. Knowing how many international projects our students and staff are involved in and go on to work on throughout their careers really highlights this. On Monday, the decision will be put to University Council. We know they've heard us. We know our words, our truths matter and have impact. No matter the outcome, I for one, and I think I can speak for all of us, have been inspired by our colleagues and the speakers here today. I know together we can shape a fairer and supportive future that's passionate about the arts and humanities and that champions the arts and humanities. Thank you for coming today. At our peak, we had about 128 people watching us on our live stream. We were stable at around 120 to 100 people throughout the day, and I think that's fantastic. I think one person who really deserves a shout out today is Joshua, who was instrumental behind setting up this live stream. So Joshua, wherever you are in the Students' Union, thank you so much. And I think another person sitting next to me deserves a shout out as well. Angela, you've been amazing at keeping all of us organized. So let's continue to stand in solidarity with one another because together we're powerful. Thank you so much for coming today.